Welcome to another episode of Index Card Insights. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how to read fast. This is a reaction episode, okay? And what that means is I'm reacting to someone else's content. The particular content I'm reacting to today on Index Card Insights is a video that I watched by Mark Manson. Now, if you don't know who that is, he's the guy who wrote the Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. And he wrote some other books as well. I'm not going to go into the different books that he's written. Maybe I'll go into that in a future episode of Index Card Insights. But today I want to talk about his YouTube channel, right? Because he's got a really cool YouTube channel. The thing about his YouTube channel is I don't agree with everything he says. Now, I'm a little bit funny, a little bit different, I would say, than a lot of people, because a lot of people tend to gravitate towards content that they agree with. And I have tried really hard to get out of that habit of only watching things that I agree with, only reading things that I agree with, only listening to things that I agree with, because I feel like in order to break cognitive biases, it's important for me to hear other people's perspectives and not just validate my own perspective with a whole bunch of content that just basically reaffirms everything that I already know or feel like I know, if that makes sense. So anyways, when it comes to Mark Manson, his channel is really cool. He's got some useful information, but some of the stuff I agree with and some of it I don't. So he did this video not too long ago called How to Read Fast. Now, I happen to be a slow reader. And this I admit, I'm a slow reader. I take my time getting through books, and I read them. I try to get something out of them. People can read faster than me, though. My son is 14 years old. He can read faster than me. Now, I'm not a stupid person, okay? I know people kind of judge me. They hear my accent, and they see how I dress, they hear my accent, and they think, oh, this guy is a dumb hillbilly or something. But honestly, I've been to college, and I'm not stupid. I'm a fairly intelligent human being. I just happen to read slowly. I've never really felt the need to look for ways to read faster, to be honest. And whenever someone has suggested ways to read faster, I've always thought, why do I want to read faster? I actually enjoy reading. I actually enjoy reading the book. I'm having a good time reading it. Why do I want to, speed up the process? I don't see a reason to. I guess I would understand speeding up the process in an effort to consume more. Oh, I can get more awesome books read if I speed up my process. I get that. I really do. But I think there's a retention issue when it comes to what you get out of the book when you do that, at least for me. So anyways, Mark Manson did this video called How to Read Fast. And I wanted to first give you the 7 big takeaways that I got from this video. Then I want to let you know in my insights, my 3 insights, a few of the things I didn't agree with and why. So first, let me give you the 7 big takeaways I got from Mark Manson. Number 1, Mark Manson says, one way you can speed up your reading is by cutting out the inner monologue. He basically says that everybody has this kind of inner monologue where we learn to read by other people reading to us. So when we go to read, a lot of us are reading the book to ourselves in our head. Right? So we have this inner monologue that's reading the book to us. And he says if you can cut that out, then you can read faster. I thought that was interesting. I'm going to talk about that in my insights. Okay, so I'm going to give you that tip that he gave us, and I'll talk about it in my insights. 2, he says if you read with your finger as a marker for where you're reading, as you move it across the page, you can actually read much faster. And the reason why that is because your eyes are naturally not steady. Your eyes naturally shift back and forth. They shift around naturally. So that's why when you're reading, it's easy to lose your place on the page. It's easy to take a word from this line, put it up to this line. It's easy to kind of do stuff like that. And he says basically that you can speed up your reading just by using your finger to mark where you're at as you go. I thought that was pretty interesting. I'd never heard that before. That was a really cool concept to me. I thought that was a nice one. The third one is, Mark says you should stop reading books and you should stop reading chapters of books that you don't like. He says he basically gives every book like let's say he's going to read a 200-page book. Like he'll read at least he says he tries to read at least 10% of every book. And what he does is, if he doesn't like the first 10%, he'll immediately go to the table of contents and he'll look for chapters that look interesting, and he'll just skip to that chapter and try to read that chapter, completely avoiding all the other chapters that he doesn't find to look interesting. His reasoning for this is that 90% of nonfiction books and self-help books are basically regurgitated information. And if it starts to feel like it's regurgitated and you've already heard these concepts before, there's no reason to read them again. You've already read them before. So he says by doing this, you can massively speed up your process for reading books. Basically, you're speeding up your process for reading books just by, not reading them or just skimming them or basically reading little parts of them, right? So that's what he says there. I'll talk more about that in my insights, all right? The fourth thing that he suggests is to schedule your reading time. And this one is probably my favorite tip because this is one that I do, and I know it works. I don't know if it really helps you read faster, but what it does is if you're a person who doesn't really read, but you have a lot of books you want to read, you buy books, but you never read them. If you're that person, then you would really benefit from scheduling a time slot to read. Now, what I try to do is I try to turn off all devices, all internet stuff at night, and an hour before I go to bed, I try to read for an hour every single night. And just by scheduling that read time, I find that I actually move books forward that I want to read. Now, if I didn't do that, it might be days or weeks before I pick up a book if I don't schedule that reading time, just because it just doesn't seem to fit in sometimes. Now, for some people, they have no trouble. They read while they're in the bathroom, taking a dump, they read while they're at the kitchen table. They read everywhere, and it's no big deal for them. I'm not really like that. I don't really want to read in the bathroom that much. And I don't really, for me, I have trouble focusing sometimes, and for me, it just works better at night when everybody's asleep, and I could just, sit there on the couch or whatever and just, read a book, and it's great. So that's me. Now that's nonfiction. Now maybe if I get really, really into some kind of fictional book or something, maybe it'd be different. I could just read it whenever, but I don't read tons of fiction anymore. But I used to love reading fiction, but I don't read a lot of fiction anymore. So anyways, yeah, so schedule your reading time. Great tip, Mark. I loved it. The fifth one that he pointed out was read more than one book at a time. Read more than one book at a time. Now, I didn't put this in my insights, so let me just say this now, okay? What I have found is that in this world of internet where it's these social media sites and all these websites are designed to kind of give you quick hits of dopamine, and it's really shortened our attention spans. What I have found is that I'll do these things called digital detoxes where I'll take a week and not do any internet, not do any kind of media or anything. And what I'll find is that when I first start those digital detox, I'll be trying to read 2 or 3 books at a time to satisfy my need for stimulation. And as the week goes on, it will kind of melt away, and I'll just kind of focus on one book, and I don't feel the need to read 3 different books at a time. But Mark talked about reading 3 different books at a time, and he says what he likes to do is he'll have 3 different categories. He'll have this philosophical book, he'll have this other nonfiction book, and then he'll have this kind of biography kind of book that's supposed to be his fun book. But basically, they're in 3 different categories, and he'll read this one for a while, And then like when he's getting bored with what's going on there, he'll switch over to this one, and then he'll switch over to this one, and he'll rotate through them. So that's what he said. And what I would say to that is, I don't like reading that way because like, I don't retain the information as well. I'm getting stories mixed up now. It's like I feel like it's basically some kind of like dopamine addict, like way to read books because you're not on the internet, because on the internet, you're like pointing and clicking at everything and you got bells and whistles going off in every direction. And like reading 3 books at once is kind of the equivalent of that in a way. I think it's better to work on your focus and just read 1 book. That's just me though. I think everybody's different. I will say that about that particular insight. The last 2 that he talked about really dealt with like how to remember, how to retain the information that you get from your books that you're reading. And I thought the first one was really cool, but I do have some insights to say on it. But anyways, the insight that he gave was that highlighting and note-taking are worthless. They're scientifically proven to not help you remember anything, is what he basically said. And he said that we remember things that we use, right? So when you read a book, and when you actually use the things that you read in that book, that's how you remember them. If they are useful, if you find the thing in the book useful and you apply it to your real life, that is how you're going to remember it. Not by taking notes, not by highlighting anything. He said those things are worthless. Now, I think this idea of we remember things that we use, very, very true and very, very real. But let me save my insight for this highlighting and note-taking are worthless until my insights, because I have something to say about that, but let me just hold off on that. The last one that he gave when it comes to like how do you make something useful? How do you, when it comes to like a book, being like something that you remember, and when it comes to actually kind of like retaining that information from reading that book, he says something that you can do is just ask the question, how does this apply to my life? As you're reading a book and as you're learning things in the book, ask the question, how does this apply to my life? How can I actually use this in my life? And by doing that little exercise, you can actually retain the information from the book easier, because essentially he's saying that one of the things we find the most useful, our brains remember things that it finds useful, and one of the things that we find most useful is things that we can apply to our actual life. So anyways, those were his big takeaways. Let me give you some of my insights on that. Okay, so the first insight that I want to give you, the first thing I wanted to talk about was this idea of questioning the inner monologue. When I watched this insight on his video, I didn't know what he was talking about. Like, maybe it's just like a terminology issue, but when he talks about questioning the inner monologue and like this idea of reading to ourselves while we're reading, and if we can stop doing that, we can read faster, he kind of lost me on that one. I didn't know what he meant. Like, I know one way to read a book, and like somehow shutting off the inner monologue, whew, that one went over my head, man. I don't know what he's talking about when he says that. I understand that like if someone's reading to me when I was a child, then maybe like as I'm reading, it's like I'm reading it to myself, but I don't know. He just kind of lost me on that one. So like my first takeaway is like this is a useless tip on reading faster, because if I don't understand it, then probably half or even more than half of the other people watching this video didn't understand it either. And this is like the inner monologue. I don't know what you mean. I know one way to read. I can read out loud and I can read silently, and that's all I know. When you talk about inner monologue and shutting that off, I don't know what you mean. So like, yeah, I that one just kind of like put a bunch of question marks above my head. So I would say it was a fairly useless tip, for at least for me, and probably a bunch of other people too. So what else? Mark said, stop reading chapters or books that you don't find interesting. Like this idea, like to me, is not something that's going to make you read faster. It's just going to make you read less. Like first of all, reading books that you don't like, I got to tell you, this kind of goes along with my theory of, destroying cognitive biases, or trying to eliminate them a little bit if possible. Like, if I only read books that I agree with, then like I'm never going to learn anything new. You know what I mean? I'm always going to be attracted to books that I kind of agree with, or I think I'm going to agree with, and I'm never going to learn anything new. I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, it's important for me to read things from people who might not have the same opinions that I have. How am I going to learn new things if I don't do that? If a chapter doesn't seem interesting to me and I just like don't read it, well then how would I ever know what was in that chapter if I didn't read it? How can I even say that I read a book if I only read a quarter of it because all the other chapters didn't seem interesting? I just read a book recently called Total Rethink by a billionaire named David McCourt. And, I battled with that book, man. I did not enjoy that book at some places. David McCourt thinks like a billionaire. He thinks differently than me. I actually did an episode on this book, Total Rethink, in a previous episode of Index Card Insights. But yeah, I battled with the book. I struggled with it because I didn't agree with him on a lot of things. But the thing about it is I learned a lot. I learned a lot from David McCourt, and I learned a lot from his book. And if I would have like just started skipping entire chapters of the book because I didn't like what it was saying, or it had a different viewpoint than my viewpoint, then I would have never gotten any of that information, right? So I feel like in the spirit of reducing cognitive biases, like this idea of just like skipping chapters and not reading books that you don't like, to be kind of ridiculous. I think it's kind of a cop-out, to be honest. It's not a way to read faster. It's just a way to read less. If you read a quarter of a book, then you read a quarter of a book. You didn't read the whole thing. That's just my opinion. Now, if you want to say, hey, well, this book looked like a regurgitation of 3 other books I've already read, so I'm just going to skip 3/4 of it. That's cool. You could say that. But you can't say you read the book, and you can only say you were speculating because you don't know for sure because you didn't read the damn thing. So, it's fine, but it's not a way to read faster. You're just not reading it. And I would kind of like question anybody who was telling me about a book if they've read it in this way, right? If you've only read 25% of the book, I probably don't care about your opinion on the book. That's just my opinion. If Mark Manson's trying to tell me his opinion on a book and he's saying he doesn't like that book and I know his like ethos and his stance on only reading like 10% of a book you don't like, and then just kind of like assuming what the rest of it's about because it sounds kind of like this other thing, well, like that opinion doesn't mean much to me. It's not weighted. Like, read the damn book, okay? I might read slow, but I read the whole thing and I think about it and I have an actual opinion on it when I'm done. That's my opinion on it. It's just like these music reviews. People listen to an album one time and then they write this music review like they really excuse me. Like they really understand the record after listening to it once, or after listening to a few songs, the singles, and then skimming the rest of it. And like they really have the expertise to write a review on it now. Sure, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I mean, how much does your opinion really matter if you haven't listened to the record multiple times? We're talking about a record that probably took those artists a couple years to make. We're probably talking about a book that probably took that writer, who knows, 6 months to a couple years to write. So like you reading 25% of it and skipping the rest because it sounds boring or it sounds like something you've already read before, hey, I respect it, but like your opinion doesn't really mean that much to me on that book. That's my opinion on that. And then my third insight is when, Mark Manson says that highlights and note-taking are worthless. First of all, the other thing that he said about we remember things that we find useful, that we find to be useful to us. Yeah, I totally agree with that. But this idea of highlighting and note-taking to be worthless, it's absolutely preposterous to me. I don't know what scientific studies that Mark Manson is referring to when he says it's scientifically proven that highlighting and note-taking is worthless. But I would challenge those studies because, personally, I take notes on books. I take highlights on books, and all those things help me remember. All those things help me remember. I think with the highlighting, it's actually the physical interaction with the book. Taking your hand, moving it across with the highlighting on that one part of the book, it like helps you remember that part because you remember that physical act of doing that. It kind of helps you retain that area. It works. It's worked for me. It's worked for many other people. That's why they talk about doing it. As far as note taking, like people have been taking notes in school for years and years and years and years and years. The reason they do it is because it works. Okay. You know, note taking helps you retain information. Why? It's probably similar to the highlighting. You're actually taking your hands, you're applying it to the paper, and you're writing the things you're trying to remember. You know, there's this old school adage in marketing and people trying to learn copywriting. One of the things they tell you to do to learn copywriting is to actually just like hand write sales letters. Find yourself a bunch of sales letters and just hand write one of them every single day. And by the end of 30 days, you're going to be a way better copywriter than when you started. Now, this is a real thing. I forget where I learned it. I can't remember if I learned it from like Dan Kennedy or Frank Kern, or if I learned it from Gary Halpert, not like personally or anything, just from reading. But yeah, I learned that somewhere from a copywriter, and the idea was just to like rewrite the thing you're trying to learn. And like, I really truly believe that because, you know, I'm a musician and, you know, I used to do lots of cover songs for people and stuff. And my process for learning cover songs was always like, you know, listen to the song and handwrite the lyrics in my own writing as I'm learning the song. And that helped me remember the lyrics. So I know for a fact that note-taking and highlighting do work. And I feel like sometimes when Mark Manson says things like this, he's just trying to be contrarian, you know, almost like he's flirting with the idea of being contrarian for contrarian's sake. You know, when you look at his book titles, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F, right? It sells a lot of book titles. It's contrarian. It sounds different. It's polarizing. He's got another book called Everything is Effed. And again, that sounds interesting. It sounds polarizing. It sounds contrarian to what you, and the book is like Everything is Effed, a book about hope. That's the subtitle, a book about hope. So when you look at that, it sounds contrarian. It sounds like very polarizing. So, you know, Mark Manson has a history of being polarizing. And when he says things like highlighting and note-taking are worthless, I feel like he's just being polarizing. And he's just being, you know, contrarian for the sake of being contrarian's sake. And it's not really something I respect. I think it's stupid. You know, I mean, if you're going to be contrarian, if you can be contrarian, then cool, be contrarian. But if you're not if you don't really believe the crap you're saying, then don't do it just for views or for book sales or for whatever. It's stupid. You're not being true to yourself. And why do I want to listen to someone who's not even being true to themselves? So that's how I kind of feel about it. That's my third insight. I want to remind everybody to get over to Epic Conversions. I got a brand new free report. It's called 12 Secrets, and it's 12 secrets on artificial intelligence and online business. It's absolutely free. It's 40 pages. It's hot off the presses. It comes with a giveaway license. Guys, artificial intelligence did not write this report. I wrote this report myself, and it's, what can I tell you? It's 40 pages. It's awesome. It's 12 of my secrets when it comes to artificial intelligence. I know it's going to help you. Comes with a giveaway license. Make sure you get over and get your copy. It's at epicconversions.com. That's all I got. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you in the next episode of Index Card Insights.